Now, Kenneth Arnold was an American pilot who worked for the Great Western Fire Control Company. His job basically in Boise, Idaho back in 1940 was that he sold fire supplies. And while on the job one day, he was just flying around and he thought he saw something. But what was it he saw? And this is the heart of what we're going to be looking at. You see, Kenneth Arnold was a very reputed aviator. He had already at that point more than 9,000 flying hours under his belt, and half of them was on search and rescue missions. On June 24th, 1947, as Kenneth Arnold was flying from Chehalis, Washington to Yakima, Washington on a business trip, he made a brief detour because he heard of a $5,000 reward that was being offered for a U.S. Marine Corps C-46 transport airport plane that had crashed in mid-flight. Now, on that day, the skies were completely clear and there was supposed to have been just a mild wind going. Now, Kenneth Arnold, somewhere around 3 p.m. at an altitude at about 9,200 feet near Mineral, Washington, gave up his search and began flying eastward towards Yakima. And this is where it's going to get interesting, because Kenneth Arnold suddenly began to see a reflection of light and thought at first that he was flying dangerously close, maybe to another airplane. And when he looked around, all he could see was a DC-7 off, in a distance, about 15 miles away, so he knew it couldn't have been that. 30 seconds later, he did, however, begin to see a series of lights, and this was north of Mount Rainier, which at that time, according to Kenneth Arnold, it was about 20 to 25 miles away from him. So he shortly figured out that the lights were coming from some sort of flying objects. And this is where the modern day movement of UFOs began. At first, Kenneth Arnold thought he was seeing a flock of geese, but ruled it out because geese do not cause such reflections to occur, and they were flying way too high, for any geese to have obtained. And the speed of the objects were well beyond, obviously, anything that the geese could fly. He then thought that maybe he had been seeing a new type of jet propulsion, some type of new jet plane that he never had heard of. But the problem with this conclusion was that there was no tails on them, and the speed was beyond anything that he had ever seen up to that time. The unknown objects appeared dark against the snowy background of Mount Rainier, and they were flying at speed beyond anything that Kenneth Arnold had known at that time. The objects flipped around erratically, and sometimes he could see them on their edge. And when they were on the edge, they seemed so thin, he said he could barely see them. Now, one of the 9 objects in particular, he said, appeared to be crescent-shaped, while the other 8 appeared to be more circular, according to what he described. Now, the objects disappeared behind one of the sub-peaks of Mount Rainier, and knowing his position and relationship to that sub-peak, Kenneth Arnold was able to determine that he was approximately 23 miles from where he was to where those objects were flying. Now, the objects were eventually determined to be larger than a DC-4 airplane or greater than about 100 feet in length. Army Air Force analysts would later estimate the objects, according to what Kenneth Arnold had described, would be somewhere between 140 to 280 feet in length, according to what Kenneth Arnold had described. Kenneth Arnold was able to determine how fast the objects were flying. They flew in between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams, which is about 50 miles apart. Now, about that time, according to Arnold, it took 1 minute and 42 seconds for these objects to fly from Mount Rainier to Mount Adams. Now, when we measure that and compare the speed to the distance find out that these objects were flying in excess of 1,700 miles per hour. Now that was 3 times faster than anything we had at that point. As a matter of fact, the speed of sound hadn't even been broken yet. As I recall, the fastest plane that was flown at that time was a P-80 going 647 miles. That was the record at the time, and that was done by Colonel Albert Boyd. At 4 p.m., Arnold had landed in Yakima. Quickly, he told his friend and general manager, Al Baxter, of his amazing sighting. On June 25th, the day after his sighting, Kenneth Arnold had flown to an air show in Pendleton, Oregon. Someone had leaked the information to the press of his encounter. Now, the following story is what was reported in the East Oregonian in Pendleton. Arnold had the makings of a reliable witness. He was a respected businessman and experienced pilot, and seemed to be neither exaggerating what he had seen, nor adding sensational details to his report. He gave the impression of being a very careful observer. On July 27, 1947, 3 days after his initial sighting, the Chicago Times reported the following. Kenneth Arnold is not so certain that the strange contraptions are made on this planet. Arnold said he hoped the devices were really the work of the U.S. Army, but he told the Times in a phone conversation, if our government knows anything about these devices, the people should be told at once. A lot of people out here are very much disturbed. Some think these may be from another planet, but they aren't harming anyone, and I think it would be the wrong thing to shoot one of them down, even if it can be done. Their high speed would completely wreck them. Another newspaper article went on to say the following. Arnold, in pointing to the possibility of these discs being from another world, said, regardless of their origin, they apparently were traveling to some reachable destination. Whoever controlled them, he said, obviously wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He said discs were making turns so abruptly in rounded peaks that it would have been impossible for human pilots to have withstood the G-forces. Now, the G-forces are those forces that, the gravitational forces that's pressed against the body when you're accelerating at such great speeds. Now, even with special equipment on nowadays, the most anyone can normally tolerate would be 6 Gs, and even then, only very few could take 6 Gs. Anyways, Kenneth Arnold thinks they are controlled from elsewhere, regardless of whether it's from Mars, Venus, or from some other planet. Now, what were others thinking of Kenneth Arnold's close encounters at that time? Well, there was a preacher who had called Kenneth Arnold and said that what he had seen were harbingers of doomsday, and that he was actually preparing his own congregation for the end of the world. Then there was the incident of this one lady at Pendleton Cafe that Arnold was eating at. The lady who had walked in saw Arnold and said, "There's the man that saw the UFOs." She started sobbing and saying that she would have to do something for her children. And then there were others who had written to Kenneth Arnold and were suggesting that these things he had seen were actually visitors from another planet. And even Kenneth Arnold himself had decided that he needed to buy a camera so he could keep it on him at all times, just in case he saw some more UFOs, or what would become known as flying saucers. But was there any corroborating evidence to back up what Kenneth Arnold claimed he had seen? Interesting enough, there was, and it would be found in a man known as Fred Johnson. Fred Johnson was a prospector on Mount Adams. You remember, one of the mountains that the UFOs, or whatever they were, had flown in between. Now, he wrote to the Army Air Force Intelligence and said he had seen 6 objects on June 24th, on or about the same time that Kenneth Arnold had seen them. Now, he had seen these objects while viewing them through a telescope. And according to Fred Johnson's description, these objects were round and tapered sharply to a point in the head. And he also said that these objects, whatever they were, seemed to have disturbed the compass. What's even more interesting is when the Army Air Force intelligence had gone over his material and talked to him personally, they said he was a very reliable witness, and he would become, because of that, the very first reported UFO case in the Air Force's records. On July 4th, 1947, the Portland, Oregon newspaper had reported that they had another eyewitness, someone named L.G. Bernier. Now, according to what Bernier had stated, he had seen 3 objects flying off in the distance right after or shortly before the same time that Arnold had seen his so-called UFOs flying over. Whatever it was L.G. Bernier had seen, he said they were moving very fast. In his own words, "I have seen P-38s flying before, but whatever these were flying much faster than any P-38 I have ever seen." The papers would report what L.G. Bernier had seen, and he would be among the first witnesses that would see what we are now calling UFO encounters. Kenneth Arnold himself would be the one person who would actually start it all. On July 4th, 1947, 10 days after Kenneth Arnold's initial sighting, a United Airlines crew over Ohio en route to Seattle in a DC-3 spotted 5 to 9 disc-shaped objects that seemed to trail them for 15 minutes. The next day, Kenneth Arnold met with the pilot, Captain Emil J. Smith, and co-pilot Stevens, and compared their sightings. The main difference in the shape was that the United crew thought that the objects appeared a bit rough on the top instead of smooth like Kenneth Arnold had said they were. Because he thought that this would be one of the very few reliable sightings, Kenneth Arnold sent a Western Union telegram to the commanding general of Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, and then, along with Captain Smith, went to Army Air Force Intelligence on July 12th and reported their sightings. On the same day in 1947, which was 18 days after Arnold's initial sighting, 8 objects were photographed flying over Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, the photo was published in the Tulsa Daily World. It was photographed by Enlo Gilmore, who believed that the military had a secret fleet of flying winged airplanes. Now, falling back on his experience as a Navy gunnery officer, along with the information he obtained from eyewitnesses, Enlo Gilmore performed a triangulation and determined that the speed of the objects was somewhere around 1,700 miles an hour. Now, that was faster than anything we were even close to back in 1947. 5 days before this event, 2 other photos of a similar solitary objects were taken by William Rhodes over Phoenix, Arizona on July 7, 1947, and appeared in a local Phoenix newspaper and some other papers at that time. Now, the object was rounded in the front with a crescent back. The negatives and prints were later confiscated by the FBI and the military. It wasn't Kenneth Arnold who came up with the term flying saucers. It was actually the newspapers of those days and age. Let me give you an example of what the newspapers were reporting. On June 26, 1947, the United Press reported, "They were shaped like saucers and were so thin I could barely see them," reporting on what Arnold had seen. June 26, 1947, the Associated Press reported, "He said they were bright, saucer-like objects." He called them aircrafts. He also described the objects as saucer-like in their motion like a fish flipping in the sun. Arnold described the objects as flat as a pie pan. The same day, the Chicago Tribune reported, they were silvery and shiny and seemed to be shaped like a pie plate. I am sure they were separate units because they weaved in flight like the tail of a kite. The Associated Press also reported, again on that same day, they flew with a peculiar dipping motion, like a fish flipping in the sun, Arnold said. He also said they appeared to fly as if fastened together. If one dipped, the other did too. And the next day, the Portland, Oregon Journal reported they were half-moon shaped, oval in front and convex in the rear. There were no bulges or cowlings. They looked like a big flat disc. Arnold said that the objects weaved like the tail of a Chinese kite. Now, 2 weeks later, Kenneth Arnold was still referring to the shape of the objects as saucers or saucer-like. On July 11th, in the Portland Oregonian again, they quoted Arnold as saying, "I actually saw a type of aircraft slightly longer than it was wide, with a thickness about 1/20th as great as its width. I reckon the saucers were about 23 miles away." International newspapers as far as Australia had also began picking up the story about Kenneth Arnold and his flying objects, or flying saucers. Kenneth Arnold also documented what he had seen by a written statement and drawing of what he had witnessed to Army Air Force intelligence. Now, the first official investigation into Arnold's sightings was done by Lieutenant Frank Brown and Captain William Davison of Hamilton Field in California on July 12, 1947. And here is what they concluded. It is the present opinion of the interviewer that Mr. Arnold actually saw what he stated he had seen. It is difficult to believe that a man of his character and apparent integrity would state that he saw objects and write up a report to the extent that he did if he did not see them at all. In 1948, the premier issue of Fate magazine ran a story, and on the cover was a first-person account of Kenneth Arnold, who told of his encounter with 9 UFOs during the previous summer of 1947. In 1952, Kenneth Arnold, along with Raymond A. Palmer, published the book The Coming of the Saucers, in which he described his experience with the flying objects. He also eventually ran for Lieutenant Governor of Idaho in 1962, but he had lost the race. And in 1977, he appeared at a convention curated by Fate to mark the 30th anniversary of the birth of the modern-day UFO era. And in 1984, after having lived such a good and long life, Kenneth Arnold had passed away. And that was just some of the highlights of his life as a civilian pilot. For the past 64 years, Kenneth Arnold's encounter has caused a firestorm of controversy. Did he actually see UFOs? Or, to paraphrase his own words, did he see something whose origins were actually of this planet? In other words, could someone from this world have been responsible for those UFOs? More about this shall be covered in the question and answer section at the end of the DVD. But for now, let's move on to section 2. UFOs have been not just part of American history, but they've also been part of different events that have happened in various nations throughout the world. UFOs have been mentioned, possibly, in various forms and in different manners, such as petroglyphs, frescoes, reliefs, paintings, tapestries, and eventually modern-day cameras would record UFO sightings. We are now going to build a timeline of possible UFO sightings around the world. We will start from the earliest records and work our way up to the year 1803. Now, here you will see a cave painting of supposed UFOs. It was discovered in Tanzania, and they've been dated back to 27,000 BC. This next one is a cave drawing of flying UFOs, and this one was discovered at the Pichi Merle cave near Le Cabaret, France. Now, what I want you to note is that a flying disc-shaped object is being viewed by someone, or at least we think that's what they're looking at. In this particular example, it was dated back to about 17,000 BC. This next cave drawing was found in Talassi in the Sahara Desert in North Africa. Supposedly, it shows a UFO behind what some believe are aliens. And this one has been dated back to 6,000 BC. Here we have a couple of petroglyphs, that have two UFOs on them. It's believed to have been drawn by ancient Indians in the American Southwest, though the dates are unknown. However, it's believed that these paintings go back thousands of years. And here we have a reproduction of an ancient relief. It was found on the island of Jotutso in 1957, and the relief is believed to be thousands of years old. Here we have Mary at the tomb of Jesus Christ. Some believe there is a giant UFO behind Mary. Now, this painting was done somewhere around 700 AD. This next one is an illustration of a burning wheel, or as some would say, a UFO. This happens to be a very old illustration that was found in Japan, and it dates back to 900 AD. Here we have an illustration of two UFOs. This is found in a Tibetan Sanskrit manual, and it dates back to 1000 BC. 1000 AD, I should say, excuse me. Now, this one is really unusual because if you go by it, UFOs supposedly appeared at the birth of Christ. I thought it was angels, but now they're saying it's UFOs. Anyways, there are two figures on the middle, right-hand side of the drawing. One is shielding his eyes as if they're being blinded by some type of very bright light. And the other figure is looking up in veneration of this spherical object. And within this so-called UFO, supposedly, there were supposed to be aliens. And this dates back to 1200 AD. Here we have a painting of two crusaders and UFOs. This painting is that of the historical siege of Sigeberg Castle in France, which happened back in 776 AD. Two of these crusaders supposedly, while the castle is under siege, are seeing these UFOs, and who knows whether they will be considered responsible for the destruction of Sigeberg Castle or not. But you can interpret this one as you want. But this one has been dated to about 1200 AD. Here we have a painting of a UFO or a balloon. Some say this is a balloon, while others believe it's a UFO. But it can't be a balloon because there was no balloons in France back in that time of history. And this was back in 1338. Now, this next one shows a Yugoslavian fresco of the crucifixion of Christ. To either side of the fresco, as Christ is dying, you will note that there are supposedly UFOs. Now, this particular fresco is dated back to 1350 AD. Here we have two French tapestries. Both tapestries denote parts of Mary's life, and if you notice, there's also UFOs in her life, or at least that's what we've been told these tapestries are telling us. And these two tapestries have been dated back to 1400 AD. Now, this next one is a famous painting by Paolo Uccello. It illustrates, again, the crucifixion of Christ. Now, two UFOs can clearly be seen beneath the cross of Calvary. And this dates back to 1460 AD. This next one is a famous painting entitled Madonna by Domenico Ghirlandaio. It shows Mary, Jesus Christ, and John the Baptist in the background. And in the background, a man is looking up at a UFO. And this was painted around 1500 AD. Next we have The Annunciation by Carlo Crivelli. Supposedly, it shows a flying saucer-shaped UFO sending a beam of light down. Now, this beam of light is supposed to be going through the Holy Spirit and onto Mary. And this was dated back to 1486. Here we have Moses receiving the Ten Commandments. As Moses is holding outstretched the Ten Commandments, 3 or 4 UFOs can be seen in the background. The date and the painter are completely unknown. This next one we have the Assumption of Mary. While Mary is supposedly being elevated into heaven, a number of UFOs are accompanying her. Don't ask me why, but that's supposedly what it's denoting, and this painting was done back in 1490. Here we have a sketch of John the Apostle with a scribe. Now, an unknown scribe is writing down the book of Revelation as told to him by John the Apostle. A dish-shaped object is hitting John with a beam, perhaps a beam of illumination or knowledge. Behind the scribe is another UFO as he writes down the book of Revelation. Was it God or was it aliens then that wrote the book of Revelation? And are UFOs supposed to appear near or around the tribulation period then? Now, this sketch is dated back to the 19th century. It's a fresco that was from Kiev. Jesus is being taken up in, or is rocketed up to heaven in some sort of UFO vehicle during his ascension. And this one was dated back to the 15th century. Here we have the famous tapestry called Summer's Triumph. It shows supposedly 3 dome-shaped UFOs, and this particular tapestry has been dated back to 1538. Over here, this next one, supposedly this illustrates some type of galactic or UFO battle going on. You'll note that there is a UFO with many different designed UFOs all over the place, and this is supposed to have happened, an actual battle over Nuremberg in Germany. Now, the story relates that many UFOs were destroyed and crashed to the ground, as you can see in the illustration. A black object was also supposed to have appeared during the battle, according to what people had reported about it. Now, this illustration dates back to 1561. This next one is a painting of 2 Dutch ships. The occupants of these 2 Dutch ships in the north witnessed 2 UFOs and aliens. And this was dated back to 1660. Here we have a sketch drawn in Hamburg, Germany. It shows 2 UFOs hovering over Hamburg itself, and this one was dated back to 1667. This next one shows a French coin, and this one was really interesting because on the back of the coin you see something that looks like a saucer-shaped object, or even possibly, if you want, a UFO that was minted on the coin. Now, what's very unusual is that it has a Latin motto or expression. It says, "Opportunis est." Translated, that means, It is here at an opportune time. And this coin was printed somewhere around 1680. Here we have a fresco of the crucifixion of Christ. There was a UFO to either side of Christ during the crucifixion, and this one was dated back to the 17th century. This next one is known as the Baptism of Christ by Edward Gelder. While Christ is being baptized by John the Baptist, a UFO is high in the sky, shutting down rays of illumination. And this is dated back to 1710. This next one is actually an illustration of Windsor Castle in England. A UFO sighting was seen from the terrace of Windsor Castle itself. And this was illustrated back in 1783. Now, in Hitachi no Kuni, Japan, a foreign or alien ship is illustrated here, and this illustration goes back to 1803. From 29,000 BC all the way up to 1803, various means have been used to convey so-called UFO sightings and appearances. Exactly what was it our ancient forefathers had seen will be covered later on, but for now we shall end it here and move on to section 3. What we did in our last section was to create an ancient timeline to show just how far back UFOs could be recorded. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to create a modern timeline. We're going to bring it further up the line from 1803 all the way up to around 1954. And the method we're going to use to create this timeline will be through the modern day camera. Using the modern day camera, we shall begin with the oldest UFO photos and move forward in time. The earliest recordings of UFOs through the camera lens could actually go back to the summit of Mount Washington. And this photo would have been taken back in 1870. As far as we know, this is the oldest of all the photos of supposedly a UFO vehicle. Now, in the 20th century, we have a UFO flying over Oregon, and this one was taken way back in 1927. In this next one, this photograph was taken in Slidewood, Colorado, and this picture in particular was shot back in 1929. Now, here's the one of George Sutton. Now, while having this picture taken, George Sutton also had company. He just was totally unaware of it. If you look over his shoulder, you can see that there was a UFO hovering up in the sky. 2 months after Pearl Harbor, the following photo was taken in Los Angeles, California. Notice the searchlights are trying to identify what had invaded their airspace. And this photo was taken back in February 25th of 1942. And here we have, once again, another one of our famous buildings in Washington, D.C., and this is the Pentagon. The Pentagon was actually buzzed by a UFO, and there was nothing that they could do about it. Now, if you look to the far middle right of the photo, you can see the UFO beginning to move out of the frame. And this photo was taken back on October 29th of 1942. Now, in World War II in England, this photo was taken while a UFO was actually flying over parts of the UK itself. And this photo was taken back in 1944. Here we have one in Phoenix, Arizona on July 7th, 1947. Now, this UFO was flying over Phoenix, Arizona on the exact same day, and I mean the very same day, that another UFO supposedly crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. You know, that biggest incident everyone talks about. And this photo was taken back on July 7th of 1947. Considered to be the father of the modern day UFO movement, Kenneth Arnold had submitted a report and drawing to the Army Air Force Intelligence back on July 12th, 1947. Now notice how Kenneth Arnold's drawing matches that of the one that was seen in Phoenix, Arizona. Kenneth Arnold's sighting was 14 days before the so-called Roswell crash, and he submitted his report and drawing 5 days after the Roswell crash. Now there could be a very interesting connection to all of this, but for now let's just move on. Notice how this eerie similarity seems to exist between this photo and the last one we saw in Morristown, New Jersey. Now this next photo was taken as it flew over the Outer Hebrides in Scotland, and that was back in 1947. In Chaplinik, Poland, this particular UFO was flying over communist airspace and with impunity, and it was taken back in 1947. Interesting enough, this next photo you will see the Capitol building of Washington, D.C. And for several weeks, UFOs were flying over Washington, D.C. and the airspace, and yet again with impunity. Here we have a photo that was taken in the land down under. A rancher named W.C. Hall took this photograph of a UFO that was actually hovering over his flock. And this photo was taken back in 1954. On the surface, UFOs do appear to be different. However, upon closer examination, we see that there are many similarities. And it's these similarities that's going to provide a lot of answers for us. Are UFOs actually changing, or are they evolving? And if they're evolving, what are they evolving into? Because there appears to be so many different types of UFOs now in different sizes and shapes, almost as if they've been evolving, we're going to take a look at the different types of machinery that so-called aliens are using nowadays. Now there are 8 basic kinds of UFOs. We have your classic dome-shaped UFO, the cigar-shaped one, the lenticular UFO, of course the V-shaped UFO, also what I call the broken V-shaped UFO. We also have a triangle-shaped UFO, the pyramid-shaped UFO, and then there is also an 8th one, but I'm not going to reveal that in this section. I'm going to save that later for the question and answer section, but I think you'll find that one is very interesting because it's going to answer a lot of questions. In this first photo, which was taken back in 1954, we see the classic dome-shaped UFO. This is a colored photo of a UFO that was just flying over a field. In this next one, which was taken in Australia back in 1954, this is an enlarged photo of a rancher's sheep herd. And this again is just another classic example of a dome-shaped UFO. Now over in Vancouver, Canada in 1957, we have once again the dome-shaped UFO. Now notice how this one appears to have some sort of landing gear on its underbelly. This is something just put in the back of your mind for now. This is something you'll want to remember. And in the Ukraine, February 4th, 1990, again, we have another classic dome-shaped UFO. And just like the one prior to this, notice how it does seem to have some sort of landing gear on its underbelly. Now, over in Reseda, California, July 14th, 1995, we have the classic dome-shaped UFO. So far, as you can see, every single one of these are all dome-shaped. The classic dome-shaped UFO, we've seen in who knows how many movies. and some of them appear to have something underneath them or maybe even landing gear. People just started seeing all of a sudden a new type, if you would, of UFO that was cigar-shaped. You could see, by the photos that they have enlarged sections, and that when you look at it sideways, they actually do sort of resemble some sort of old-fashioned cigar or stogie. Now, over Heathrow Airport in England, there was a particular cigar-shaped UFO that you could see, if you look at this photo, at the tail end of this airplane. And it really shocked everyone. No one knew what it was at first. And all of a sudden, people started saying, this is a new type of UFO that we need to get used to. Well, this photo was taken back only a couple of years ago, back on October 13th of 2009. And it seemed cigar-shaped UFOs are really beginning to show up in a lot of different places now. It just seemed as if the cigar-shaped UFOs you just see once every now and then, but now, going by this next example in Mexico on February 14, 2001, the Mexican volcano Popocatépetl was venting steam. And if you look right by the steam, you'll actually see this cigar-shaped UFO flying right by it. And of course, it would be Texas. Strange things happen in Texas, folks. But here we have what I call the Texas cigar-shaped UFO incident. This one was taken a number of years ago in Lake Granger, Texas. You look at the first photo, you will see a number of children playing in Lake Granger. But if you look towards the right hand of that photo, towards the rear, you'll see something there. Now, when we look at this next photo, you're going to see that this something is another cigar-shaped UFO. A lenticular flying saucer-shaped UFO is anything that looks like the classic ones. It's when you take two pie tins and you put them one on top of another, just like this. The classic looking flying saucers that, supposedly have been reported in papers and been photographed around the world, Just like, the flying saucer you would have saw on Lost in Space, that was known as the Jupiter 2. Now, one of the oldest photos of a lenticular-shaped UFO can be seen here. This one was taken over Edwards Air Force Base. Now, I want you to take a good look at the B-47 bomber that this lenticular UFO is following. And this photo was taken back in September of 1957. And as with, the previous examples, you'll find out that even these types of UFOs, they've been spotted all around the world now. And in this next photo, you're going to see one more lenticular-shaped UFO. This one was really a low-flying one, and it appears to have been flying over some sort of wooded area. This next one, this was taken in a plain-like region in Chile, and this photo was taken back October 3rd in 2009. Next, we get into what I call the broken V-shaped UFO. Now, in August of 1951, a series of photos were taken over Lubbock, Texas, of a broken V-shaped UFO formation. And in this next photo, you'll see another example of the broken V-shaped UFO formation. The date behind this one is unknown, but one last broken V-shaped UFO example was taken back, the photo, on April 21st, 2010. And this one was made up of 12 different UFOs. They just formed this V-shaped. Now, the next kind of UFO that we're going to take a look at is what I call the triangle-shaped. Now, recently, another nation's airspace was invaded by one of these particular UFOs, and that happened to have been Russia. Now, it was, as I was saying, one of those particular triangle ones. And this one, if you look at the photo, it was absolutely massive. And there was one last incident that I'm aware of in which a triangle-shaped UFO was flying over the airspace, and this happened to have been in Florida. And if you look at this next photo, you can tell it was flying over I-75 near SR5 for 2.5 hours. I mean, that's 2.5 hours. People could actually look up and see this thing flying back and forth. The next classic type of UFO we're going to be looking at will be what I call the V-shaped UFO, or the full V formations. Now, here we have an artist's rendition of one of those V-shaped UFOs. Now, something strange has been going on in Arizona since 1997. These unknown lights that seem to be forming V-shaped or V-formed UFOs have been constantly flying over the area. No one knows exactly what's been going on, but for 14 years, it seems these lights have been coming and going, and it really, I have to tell you, this really is interesting, because you would think after all this time there'd be some sort of really good photographic evidence, but no one seems to be able to nail down any really good photos at this point. So the question is, what is it that they're really seeing up there? We know that there are these lights, but what are they? Now here we have another V-shaped UFO, and this one you can see the center very, very clearly, and you can see that it is empty, that there's nothing there. So it is a classic V-shaped UFO. And this photo was taken back in May 29th of 2008. Now, here is a very unusual shaped UFO. I wouldn't have even mentioned it unless I thought it was important enough for you people to know this, because, as I've stated before, there are 8 types of UFOs, and I really want you people to get acquainted with these. This next one is what I call the pyramid-shaped UFO. Now, the problem is when we look at this first photo, is the UFO flying upside down, or is it really right side up? And that's part of the problem with this type of UFO. You can't tell if the capstone is supposed to go down or up. Then again, I've never been visited by a pyramid-shaped UFO, or any UFO for that matter of fact. Now, at least with this next photo, it seems this upright pyramid is supposed to be flying the way it is, you know. And this was in Cucuta, Colombia, where this photo was taken. And that was back on August 8, 2010. Now this last shaped UFO, this last pyramid-shaped one, was flying over Japanese airspace, and again, if you notice, it is pyramidal in its shape. More and more, it seems that the classic shaped UFOs are being replaced. You know, the ones that we're used to seeing, the broken V shape, the triangle, the full V-shaped pyramid type UFOs. Those are replacing all the classic UFOs that you and I had probably seen growing up in movies and television shows, you know, like the dome-shaped one or the lenticular-shaped one. Even the cigar-shaped UFOs seem to be fading away nowadays. But the question is, why? Why are all these new UFOs seemingly pushing the old models behind? It's almost as if, you know, these new ones are evolving, possibly. You know, when you think about this, have all these so-called civilizations from outer space that have been building all these UFOs, have they just decided to up and leave our planet? You know, did they just get tired of the old models and say, let's replace them with the newer models? It just doesn't make sense, you know? Why would all these new models replace the old ones? Unless, of course, aliens aren't behind this. it would make perfect sense if we look at it from a human standpoint. In other words, human beings are involved in this one way or the other. And as we go along, you're going to find out that the 8th type of UFO that I had mentioned in the beginning is going to supply more answers than most people would ever expect. Who or what has been driving all of these UFOs? Now, we needed to identify what was flying over the airspace of nations across the globe, and the so-called flying ships were also identified so we could determine if they were of extraterrestrial origin. Now, the next logical step is to identify the drivers of all of these so-called UFOs. Now, our space aliens, and I mean space aliens, driving the UFOs, or is someone else behind it? Which begs the question, are there any historical records of actual aliens visiting the Earth? What we shall do now is delve into the annals of history and determine if there is any truth behind so-called alien visitations in our past. Throughout the centuries, ancient artifacts purport to identify those who are driving the UFOs. When we look at this ancient cave drawing, it's supposed to depict alien visitors. One interesting thing to note is that there are no UFOs there. One would easily assume then that if the people back then had seen the aliens, that they would have seen their flying vehicles. But as I said before, for some reason, they're missing in action. This next photo will show you an Australian cave painting. Now here we have another example of a classic cave painting of an alien. So where's the spaceship? Now here is what I titled The Waving Spaceman. This so-called alien appears to be waving, but waving at who or what is the question. Or is he just simply saying, take me to your leader? I don't know, but again, the big question is, where is the spaceship? Where was the evidence that this creature was flying any of these UFOs? Where's the evidence? Now, in this next painting, this is basically one of those hunter-gatherers paintings with aliens in it, supposedly. And this cave painting has been described as a scene showing some hunter-gatherers and their prey while space aliens are looking on. Here we have an ancient cliff carving. This is supposed to be, as I said, one of those ancient cliff carvings, but this one has aliens in it. Now, I'm assuming we're supposed to believe that these are aliens because if you look at the figures, they have 3 fingers and 3 toes each. I don't know why that's supposed to mean that they're aliens, but supposedly that's what I've been told, and that's what everyone else who looks at that particular painting, that those are supposed to be 2 space aliens. This next one, in this next painting, you're going to see is an ancient Dogon painting on the side of a mountain. And like the others, supposedly this is supposed to denote some type of alien and possibly UFOs. Now, there's an Aboriginal people in Australia. They're known as the Wandjina. And the pictures that they drew are supposed to represent rain and cloud spirits. However, there are those UFO aficionados who will try to tell you that this is nothing more than aliens once more. And what's really interesting is these pictures, these ancient paintings, they go back all the way to 3000 BC. Here we have an Egyptian painting. Now, This is a very, very rare and unusual Egyptian painting, because if you look at it just on the surface value of it, it does appear that this is some sort of aliens, you know, one of the classic gray ones with the big bulging black eyes, but that's only if you look at the surface of it. Now, if you look at the blow-up version, which you're going to see now, the alien itself has wings. Now, I've heard of many different types of aliens, supposedly, in this life, but I have never, ever heard of one with wings. Now, this drawing you're going to take a look at right now is a famous astronaut drawing that is found in the area known as the Nazca Lines in Peru, but we'll be covering that in another section. However, what is interesting about this particular geoglyph is that it is hundreds and hundreds of feet tall. And according to those people who, for some reason, maybe they don't understand the true nature behind the Nazca Lines, they state that this is a classic and a definite answer of some type of astronaut. Now, let's take a look at some ancient statues and figurines of aliens. Found in Kiev, which is the capital of the Ukraine, southwest of Moscow, this next photo is supposed to show you what is supposed to be an alien or a modern day astronaut, if you believe it, another ancient alien. And the reason they believe this is because if you look at what he is wearing, it does look similar to maybe some sort of space suit with a helmet, you know, but if you look at the rear part of the statue, supposedly that is supposed to be some sort of breathing apparatus. But there are those who are saying that this particular statue is actually that of one of the Anunnakis. Now, the Anunnaki, according to ancient myths, had visited Earth about 3,600 years ago. The Anunnakis are supposed to be from a planet or a moon that is called Nibiru. But if you really want to get deeper into the Anunnaki, Nibiru, and all this, now going to, you know, the other part of the world, let's take a look at some Japanese figurines. So you may really understand the so-called Anunnaki race we were just talking about. Let's take a look at these two figures in particular. The one on the left we had just seen. Supposedly this alien is wearing a spacesuit with some sort of life support system on his back. The second alien, the one on the right, is more lizard-like and more akin to what the Anunnaki is supposed to actually look like. Remember, these were figurines found in Japan, which some people want to call aliens from some sort of planet or moon that is called Nibiru. Here we have an ancient Sumerian statue. Now, according to some, this is actually one of the gray aliens we've heard about for the past 25 years. This clay statue can be found in the Kosovo Museum, the goddess on the throne. However, according to UFO enthusiasts, this is supposed to be representative of an ancient alien instead. Notice that the so-called aliens have a lizard-like quality to them. Could this be the origins of the so-called lizard alien sin? As with the last examples, notice that these figurines also have a lizard-like quality to them. And interesting enough, these particular figurines we know came from ancient Sumeria. So it's almost funny when you think about it that depending on which UFO enthusiast you go by, well, maybe the Sumerian race are ancient aliens instead. And with these last ones, these are Japanese figurines. Each of the figurines is some sort of winged creature or being, but the question is, because they have wings, does that make them alien in origin? I mean, really. Supposedly, if you believe all the ancient accounts, the gods, or aliens, visited Earth in various flying machines. Ancient artifacts from across the globe supposedly prove that the gods walked amongst us. If the following series of photos I will be showing you are true, you will be looking at various flying machines that are thousands of years old. These machines, if they are alien in origin, are of a technology far beyond anything that our ancient forefathers could have created. That is, if they are of alien origin. Now, we look at this next photo here. You're going to see a relief. Now, supposedly, on this relief, you're looking at various airplanes and such. Now, when looking at the upper left-hand corner of this relief, the image does look like a modern-day helicopter. But the one problem is, where is the rear propeller? Without that, you just can't fly the machine. There's no stability. Now, if you look at the three images, on the right-hand side of that relief, they do seem to resemble some of our modern day airplanes after a sort. This next photo, you're going to see an Egyptian fresco. Notice that very close to the middle of the fresco, there appears to be a classic example of a dome-shaped UFO. There appears to be what some folks are calling a classic example of a lenticular-shaped UFO, and that on either side of the UFO there's supposed to be an alien being standing there. It is believed that the UFO is shooting down some sort of rays. Some say that those rays are possibly anti-gravity waves. Now, here we're going to see a pre-Columbian artifact. Now, this artifact, I remember this one from the 70s, and supposedly this artifact, and I have to admit, it really does resemble one of our modern day airplanes. Now, this same vehicle is supposed to be now representing a space shuttle. In other words, well, it seems to better fit a space shuttle than a modern day aircraft. So there you have it. We've somehow managed to promote this thing from an airplane to a space shuttle. So you see, a lot of these things we just simply fit into what we think is necessary for the time. And here we have an artifact from Peru. This particular artifact is supposed to be hundreds of years old, and it's supposed to be representative of one of our modern day aircrafts again. This next photo will show you an Aztec artifact. This next one is one of the more interesting ones. This is what's known as the Palenque astronaut. Now, this artifact is actually the top of a funerary sarcophagus that was located in a tomb in South America. The figure on this funerary lid is that of Patel, considered to be one of the most important leaders in Aztec history. The funerary lid itself, as I said, is Patel. Now, let's take a comparative look between this funerary lid of Patel and the last one. In interesting detail, notice how it is believed that this figure is not Patel, but that of an ancient astronaut. The figure is supposed to be driving some sort of unknown, possible alien vessel. So there's one or two things going on here with this particular funerary lid. Either it is the most important historical figure in Aztec history known as Patel, or it is supposed to be some sort of alien that is driving some sort of UFO. The question is, which one is it? In this next photo, you will see an ancient clay jar. This ancient clay pottery is supposed to be hundreds of years old. And if you look carefully, you're going to see the figure on the clay jar is supposed to be that of some sort of alien. In this next photo, you're going to see the remains, or at least what we've been told, are the remains of an ancient gray alien. The remains are 2.5 feet tall, and this body has been identified in the past by various people as an ancient example of a gray alien. This next one, we're going to take a look at an Egyptian sarcophagus. This is the same gray alien we just discussed. Its own remains, the body itself, was found in this particular sarcophagus. Now the stone figure on your left is that of Queen Nefertiti of Egypt. On your right hand side is the skeletal remain of an elongated head. It has been postulated by quite a number of people that the elongated skeletal head is that of an alien. And because of that, there are actually those people who believe that Queen Nefertiti herself could have been an alien or was a descendant of an alien race. Now, I know this has been a lot of information we've gone through, but I thank you very much for your patience. And without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's just move on to our next section. I have found absolutely nothing that's compelling or convincing. I have quite literally spent and looked through thousands and thousands of photos. I don't know how many different films I went through of supposed aliens and action and all this. And as it says, there was absolutely nothing that is compelling nor convincing. So what we are going to have to do now, vicariously speaking, is travel to other countries throughout the world and see if there is any evidence of aliens interacting into the affairs of humanity. Since we can't come up with any solid photographic evidence of aliens, we're going to have to see if we can find this through other channels and maybe some indirect means. Now, the Nazca lines themselves are a series of ancient geoglyphs or drawings in the earth. They are located in the southern part of Peru in the Nazca Desert. Now, the desert itself stretches for a little bit more than 50 miles, and it's located between the towns of Nazca and Palpa. Now, when we consider the drawings, or what are known as geoglyphs, they can be categorized into three major sections. The first one being geometric, which are known mathematical symbols and such. The next one would be the phytomorphic geoglyphs, or what's known as, trees, flowers, and plants, things like that. And then there's what's known as the zoomorphic ones, which the drawings will be animal, birds, humans, humanoid, things along that line. Now, the Nazca lines themselves, according to archaeology, can be dated somewhere between 200 BC and 600 AD. And the archaeologists determined this by the ancient material that was left behind when these drawings had been created onto the earth itself. It wasn't until 1920 that the Nazca lines were accidentally discovered. You see, back then, we had commercial airplanes that were flying over the area of that part of the desert, and people began noticing these straight lines, and eventually they saw all these animal figures and such, and it wouldn't take long for them to have seen all this, because the area that all these geoglyphs are found in covers 190 square miles, so that's one very big chalkboard, and it would be very difficult to miss, especially if flying over it. Now, the desert itself, the Nazca Desert itself, is one of the driest places on Earth. The temperature there is just about a constant 77 degrees. There is very, very little rain there, and because there is also very little wind that blows through that region of the world, all that is why those lines, which some of them are purported to be almost 2,000 years old, it's for that reason that they're so perfectly preserved. There is absolutely nothing going on there that would kick up any of the dirt or anything. Now, the lines themselves, the drawings, all of them, it's very easily made. You see, the top surface of the desert there is made up of a reddish brown dirt. So what you do, if we go by the measurements of the lines we see nowadays, they're about 3.9 to 5.9 inches in depth. What you do, remove the top reddish brown surface, expose the underbelly, and it's a very light colored earth underneath. So once you start digging, those lines are going to be seen almost from any angle up above. When we consider the Nazca lines themselves and the creation, one thing you'll immediately pick up on is that the lines do run horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. And that these lines, some of them are going to be quite literally hundreds and hundreds of feet long. Now, we're going to be using this particular map as a rough guide. This way we'll be able to traverse that 190 square mile region where the Nazca lines can be found and show you particular geoglyphs that we are going to be looking at as we go along. We're first going to start off with the geometric shapes, and the first one we're going to look at is known as a trapezium. Now, it looks like a straight line. Okay, some people say it actually looks like a highway. Now, it was the author, Erich von Däniken, who wrote the book, Chariots of the Gods, back in the 70s, who claims that features like these are nothing but landing strips for UFOs. Now, this next photo is known as a trapezoid. Now, a trapezoid is a four-sided figure where only two sides are parallel. And it's because this symbol is considered to be complex. People are saying, well, this couldn't have been the work of the Nazca people. Surely they had to have had some type of alien intervention. Now, this next symbol is a very common symbol. You'd recognize it as a spiral. Now, these photos that you just looked at, these were just some of the common geometric shapes that you can find on the Nazca plains. If you'll remember, phytomorphic shapes include plants, trees, flowers, and things of that nature. Now, here is an example of one of the phytomorphic geoglyphs. This one is known as the tree. In this next photo, we'll see what some people have referred to as a flower. To me, yeah, it looks like, you know, one of those daisies we drew when we were children. That's what it reminds me of. And here's an example of another flower. Or at least that's what some people call it. For me, I think it looks more like it's some sort of cactus, you know. Now this one in particular, this cactus, what I think it is, this one is over 500 feet tall. I think it's exactly 595 feet tall. I mean, think about this. This cactus is as tall as a 60-story office building. That's how big this geoglyph is. Now, what we need to do, we're going to get into the zoomorphic geoglyphs now. Now remember, the zoomorphic geoglyphs contains animal, birds, humans, or humanoid creatures of that type. Now, this first geoglyph is known as the hummingbird. This width of this particular bird, this one has a width of 216 feet. I mean, that thing is wide and it is as long as a standard football field to this very day. I mean, this thing is humongous. On this next photo, we're going to be showing you what's known as a condor. Now, the length of this particular bird is 350 feet long, and its width is as long as its depth. I mean, it's 350 feet on all sides. So, in other words, no matter which way you measure it, it's going to be longer than a football field. I mean, that's quite a big bird there. And here we have what some people refer to as the Alcatraz bird. This drawing is also hundreds and hundreds of feet across. This frontal section over here, not so much the back part, but the frontal, people are calling that a parrot. Quite honestly, yeah, I suppose it could take on the look of a parrot. It's a bit difficult, but that particular bird, depending on where you begin the measurement, is anywhere from 400 to 750 feet in length, and it's as wide as 350 feet, or again, wider than a standard football field. And then this next one, there's a lot of controversy over what to call this next one. Right now, it's referred to as the vulture, but it doesn't look like a vulture to me. Some people say, yeah, okay, it's a vulture. Others say it's a chicken. Then there are those who say this is actually a dodo bird that was extinct from the Macedon period. Now, to me, it looks like it's a baby dinosaur of sorts. So, really, at this point, I would say it's anyone's guess. Next, we shall look at the animals of the Nazca lines. Now, in this first photo, I think it's very easy to see that this is a monkey. Now, the height of it is incredible. It's 200 feet in height and a little bit more than 250 feet wide. In other words, this is one of those really big geoglyphs we had mentioned. Now, the next one is the dog. Here we have just another example of another animal geoglyph. And this dog, just like the monkey, this one is hundreds of feet long. Now this next one, this one is where we're going to come into a lot of controversy. It's known as the whale. Now the image is almost center of the picture, and you should see an intersecting line running through its middle. Now some people have postulated that the whale is one of the reasons why humans cannot have been totally responsible for the creation of the Nazca lines. After all, how could the people of Nazca Desert draw something that they've never seen? I mean, it's not as if whales are swimming in the middle of the desert. So where did they come up with this idea? Some people have postulated that only aliens hovering high above the ground in their spaceships could have instructed the Nazca people on how to draw this geoglyph. And this next one is known as the astronaut. Now, what is supposed to be more proof of alien involvement with the creation of the Nazca line is done through the astronaut, because again, a lot of people are saying, how could the people of the Nazca region drawn an astronaut or possibly an alien, something that they've never seen before? Why would they draw something, or how could they have drawn something they've never seen? There are many different theories and arguments for the creation of Nazca lines. Were they created by human hands? Could aliens be responsible for them? Exactly who or what created the Nazca lines? All these questions will be answered, but before we go on, there's a couple of last photos I want you folks to take a look at. Now, if you'll recall, we've already looked at this photo, and it's known as the hummingbird. However, what I didn't show you was this next photo. And this next photo is a crop circle. This crop circle is also a hummingbird, and if you notice very carefully, it's almost exactly like the one you find on the Nazca lines. So, is there a connection? between this crop circle design, this geoglyph, and the one found on the Nazca lines. Now, this next one is known as the gear. You will see that we first have the Nazca picture of the gear, the geoglyph on the ground, and then we'll take a look at this next wheel or gear, and you'll notice almost instantly how it seems to match up almost flawlessly with the one on the Nazca lines. Now the question is that more evidence of some type of alien intervention? And then we have this last one that's known as the spiral. We've already gone over this one on the Nazca lines as this photo shows you. Now this next photo, which is a crop circle, is also a spiral. So you see, something is going on here. The Nazca lines appear to be steering us towards crop circles because these crop circles, these geoglyphs, are matching up with the ones on the Nazca lines. Now the question is, considering that Peru, well I should say the area of Peru, is literally thousands of miles away from England where these crop circles can be found, how can there be any similarities? I mean, how could this connection have happened? I mean, it almost defies the imagination. Here we have South America over here, Europe over here, Peru on this side of South America, England over here, and they are separated by thousands of miles. So how? How could there be these similarities? What we're going to do, we're going to end it here, ladies and gentlemen, so we can get right into the next section and start answering all these questions for you. Is there a connection between the Nazca lines and crop circles? Well, the first question we really must answer is, what are crop circles? Crop circles, for the most part, just like the Nazca lines, are what's known as geoglyphs, drawings into the earth itself. Now, up to this date, so far, there have been more than 10,000 crop circles or crop formations that have been reported. And for some odd reason, 90 to 95% of them are found in the Wiltshire region in England. Why there? Once we take a good look and examine what is going on with these crop circles or crop formations, I think we'll be a lot closer to the answers we've been looking for. The phenomenon known as crop circles, or what is more properly called crop formations, can be traced back somewhere at least back to 1678. See, in this pamphlet that was printed back in 1678, the caption reads, "The Mowing Devil." It shows that a crop circle had been created and that the culprit was Satan. Now, one thing that really interests me about this particular flyer is that there were no strange lights, no strange noises, and no vehicles or UFOs when this had been reported. Now, nowadays, of course, we have strange lights, UFOs, even noises, and sometimes balls of light flying around when these crop circles or crop formations are being made. And sometimes people have been reporting that inexplicit energies can now be felt within these crop circles. So I can't help but wonder why, at least with this particular incident, why none of these things were reported. Two men named Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley stepped into the limelight by claiming they were the ones responsible for the creation of crop circles. Supposedly, they proved that they were the guilty ones by producing a plank or a board that had a long piece of rope tied to either end of it. But they claimed that they were the ones that were doing and creating all these crop circles. Now, because of these wild claims, crop circles and any interest in it just died away like that. I mean, literally, it just looked like any interest in crop circles had faded away. But something would happen that would revitalize the interest in crop circles, and it would come back with a vengeance. You see, even though Dave and Doug claimed that they were responsible for crop circles while they were living in England, suddenly crop circles began to appear all throughout the world. We're talking about all different types of new types of shapes and forms, which is why crop circles now are referred to as crop formations. So it very soon became apparent that Doug and Dave could not have been responsible for all these crop circles that were being made. And quite literally, more than 10,000 crop circles have been reported now. It did eventually become known that Doug and Dave actually worked for the British Ministry of Defense as part of their disinformation team. You see, the Ministry of Defense wanted to be the only ones examining crop circles and looking into their true origin, so they paid Doug and Dave, to tell their lies and their whoppers, and eventually even Doug and Dave admitted that they made all this up and that they were working for the Ministry of Defense. No longer are these geoglyphs, just laid out in a circular fashion. The vast majority of various crop formations contain very intricate designs, mathematical formulas, effigies, binary codes, and many other different shapes and designs. What we are going to do now is take a look at a number of crop formations and see if there are any connections to aliens or whatever they may be. When we take a look at this next photo, it shows what is known as the galactic center. The crescent moon shape of this design towards your right represents the moon. Connected to the moon is a large circle with rays emanating in all directions. This is the sun. And the spiraling center part of it is the center of the Milky Way galaxy, the galaxy we live in. Now, directly below the sun and the moon figures is another figure that looks like an oval with a tail. That symbol is supposed to be, according to many people, the planet or moon that's referred to as Nibiru. Now, on DVD 7 and 8, we covered many of the cultural and so-called prophetical outlooks which pertain to what's going on with December 21st, 2012. One of those aspects claims that a mysterious, almost unknown planet or moon, known as Nibiru, is going to enter our solar system and pass by Earth so close this time that there's going to be all types of chaos and destruction throughout the world. So, the question I would like to ask then, why would the aliens draw something like this? I mean, are they trying to tell us that planet Nibiru is real and that it's going to cause all types of havoc and destruction on December 21st, 2012, and that we should prepare ourselves for it? This next picture shows a massive crop formation that was made near Avesbury Manor. Towards the far middle left of this picture, you will see 4 small circles. These circles are supposed to be either a comet or planet Nibiru, and what the rest of our solar system is supposed to look like on December 21st, 2012. Once again, you have to ask the question, what is the aliens interested in all this, and are they trying to tell us that something is going to happen on December 21st, 2012? This next photo shows us a crop formation that represents the Mayan symbol for the end of the 5th age. Accordingly, the 5th age is supposed to end on December 21st, 2012. Again, are aliens trying to tell us that we have nothing but doom and gloom in our near future? Now, what is very intriguing to me is this next symbol. Now remember, the 5th symbol says, according to some people, that the earth comes to an end. So when we look at this next photo, this is the symbol, the Mayan symbol now for the 6th age. Now, why would we need a symbol for this sixth age if everything's going to come crashing and burning at the end of the fifth age, December 21st, 2012? You know, this really just doesn't make sense to me when we find out that there's now a sixth symbol. Now, according to the photos we had just seen, so-called alien crop formations were telling us that planet Nibiru is going to enter into our solar system and wreak havoc on December 21st, 2012. Now, again, as I said before, how can this possibly be true if, according to what we now know, we have another crop formation? This one marks the sixth age according to the Mayan calendar. How are we supposed to go on? We're supposed to be blowing up, doom and gloom at the end of the fifth age. So why would they need, again, a symbol for the sixth age? This is just not adding up. And for aliens who supposedly come from a super advanced civilization, who have all this knowledge and wisdom, they sound like they're very, very confused at this point for making a sixth symbol if, according to what they were trying to tell us before, we're going to be blown up by the time the fifth symbol comes around. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? This just isn't making sense. This next crop circle looks very much like one of the UFOs that we've already discussed. You know, the UFO cigar-shaped formation that a lot of eyewitnesses tell us, you know, that's what they saw and that's a UFO. And if we look at this symbol on this crop circle, it is circling our planet, and for some reason it seems that aliens, once again, when we look at this photo, seem very interested in planet Earth. Now, when we look at this next crop formation, it shows us what our solar system looked like when this symbol was drawn back on July 27, 2008. It appears that for some reason aliens are interested in us, or maybe the Earth for some reason or another. But is something else going on here that we don't know about? I mean, is there really something here that we need to know about? When this next alien crop formation was discovered, it made headlines and made a buzz around the world within days. For the first time, we were supposed to be looking at an actual alien. Now, right next to the alien was a circle with a very unusual pattern in it. This circle has what some people believe to be a very complex binary code. Now, because of this binary code, aliens were supposed to be trying to communicate with us. However, no one as of this day has yet managed to decipher that code. But for me, this story really gets a lot more chilling as we move along and take a look at other crop formations. Some of you may not recognize this next symbol. It is a double helix code of our DNA strand, the actual building blocks that determine physically what we're going to be. Now, why would aliens be interested in our DNA makeup? But let's continue. In this next photo, two crop formations were found next to the Chiltern Radio Telescope in Hampshire, England. The first formation showed us what was supposed to be another alien figure. And this one is similar to the one you had just seen. But it's a second formation that quite literally sent a chill up and down my spine when I first saw it. The second crop formation at first glance doesn't appear to mean anything, but there is something very ominous in it. Before I reveal what it is, allow me to give you a little bit of an astronomical history lesson. Now, for many decades, we've been sending radio messages and such out into outer space and hoping that we'd make some type of alien contact. Now, through the use of radio telescopes, as with the Tibetan one, we have sent out different messages in various forms. Now, at first we were using mathematical codes which intelligent life would be able to obviously decipher. Now, it's nowadays we're sending out codes in what's known as a binary form or as a binary code in hopes that it'll reach someone in outer space. Now, to this date, to this very date, we have never received any signals back from outer space that would state that there is some type of intelligent life form out there. There's been not one instance. So if anyone tells you otherwise, don't believe them. We haven't received anything as of yet. Now, in this second crop formation photo, some believe we have been listened to. Taking a look at this image, we can tell that some type of signal, it appears, may have been sent to us from outer space. We look at that image and it's almost a perfect mirror image, and I'll explain why it's almost a perfect mirror image. When we look very carefully at this next photo, you may have to pause your DVD to see the differences, but you will be able to see them. Now, the most important differences here, I'm going to point out now. There was a third, if you look very carefully, there was a third DNA strand in our double helix code. Now, why would someone add a third strand to the double helix code since we have just two strands? Why would someone suddenly want to introduce a third strand? And it could be, and this is just supposition on some people's part, that the so-called extraterrestrial life form, and I do say so-called, that may have created this crop formation may be trying to tell us that this is how their DNA strand is made up. That, in other words, they're a triple helix code as compared to us. Or it could be that they're trying to instruct us into adding a third strand to our DNA makeup. And if we did this, would we end up as some sort of superhuman being or advanced being, something like that? And it's very interesting because all this reminds me of the work and research that Dr. Thomas Horn at Radio News Network has been working on. He's been working so diligently on what's known as transhumanism. This is where they're literally fooling around with our DNA construct and trying to create super soldiers or superhuman beings out of it. I would strongly recommend that you folks look up Dr. Thomas Horn on the internet and take a look at his research into transhumanism. It's really quite incredible. So the question is, by introducing a third strand into our construct, would we actually be able to create an army of super soldiers? I mean, literally, when you think about fooling around with the actual building blocks that make us who and what we are, you don't know what you could come up with. I mean, maybe it would be something better, but knowing mankind and knowing that we shouldn't be playing God, I have a feeling all this would end up or not. Throughout the past 3 decades, there have been more than 10,000 crop formations reported. Some were not done by human hands, and others, which I consider to be hoaxes, were obviously done by human hands. The first one obviously wasn't done by an alien. Now this next symbol, which is supposed to be an Illuminati symbol, is another fake. If you look at the sides very carefully, you can tell the triangle is uneven. In this next photo, which was made in Mexico, this one is also another fake. This next crop formation has the classic alien expression, "Take us to your leader, dog," with an obvious modern day twist to it. And this last formation had to have been the worst crop formation ever created in all of history. Thus far, we have looked into the history of crop circles and formations. First of all, we looked at the early formations that were properly known as crop circles. Now, as we've looked at the more intricate designs as they have become now, well, the name has been altered from crop circles to crop formations. And along the way, we have also seen crop formations that tend to suggest there may be some type of alien involvement going on here, maybe directly, sometimes indirectly, but something seems to be showing us, at least in some of the formation, that there could be an alien connection here somewhere. And the question is, are they trying to communicate with us? Are they possibly trying to impart onto us knowledge that they possess, who knows, for tens of thousands of years? Now, supposedly, they've also been sending back to us possibly binary coded messages in the form of these crop formations themselves. And part of the information, it appears, could be trying to explain to us how to alter and possibly add a third strand to our genetic makeup. And what is really interesting is that the so-called aliens who created the crop formations themselves, it appears that they are interested in certain major civilizations on our Earth. And especially, they really do seem to have a keen eye on the Mayan civilization for some reason. And if you remember, it was, according to the Mayan long count calendar, that on December 21st, 2012, the Earth supposedly is gonna crash and burn somehow, some way. Now, if aliens really are trying to communicate to us through crop formations, their intelligence really is becoming known. If you take a look at this next picture, this was made in Wiltshire, England, back on May 22nd, 2012. This is known as Euler's identity. Now, this is considered by most to be the most beautiful and the most elegant theorem in existence. And if you understand it, you'll know immediately that this is also a very complex theorem itself. We're going to take a look at another pattern that's going on to help us fit in more pieces of the so-called alien puzzle. Now, in this photo here, we have another crop formation that in the occult world is known as a pentagram. Now, a pentagram will be used by a practicing occultist, be they a witch, a Satanist, someone in the Illuminati, or what have you, who wants to communicate directly with demons. Now, I can't help but wonder, why would aliens be interested in these occult symbols? It doesn't make sense, does it? But let's move on. This next symbol is the foulest, the most evil of all symbols in the occult world. There is nothing that can even come close to it. This symbol, it's known as a hexagram, and you need to use it if you're going to literally, and I mean literally, summon up a demon to this plane of existence. There are many different groups that go under hundreds of various names that could be umbrellaed under witchcraft. Some of them would be neo-pagans, Wiccans, pagans, things along that line. Now, within those groups, there are a lot of differences, but one thing that they do have in common is that they worship two specific gods. One is known as the god, the male god, and then there is the goddess, the feminine aspect of the god. Now, this next photo you're going to take a look at. This is known as the Ishtar Gate. Now, what you need to see here is that it has a crescent moon formation. Now, it is the crescent moon that is the oldest symbol for the female goddess of the occult world. And when we're talking about the god of the occult world, the oldest symbol for him in existence is what's known as a pentagram, or what's known as the five-pointed star with a circle around it, generally speaking. This next crop formation is known as a goddess, and this one was also created in the area of Wiltshire, England, July 27, 2008. Now, notice how this female figure is reaching up to a moon. Remember, this is a goddess and a moon symbol, or what a lot of us recognize today as the planet Venus. Now, take a look at this photo of an Illuminati card. Can you see the similarities between that card and this crop formation known as the goddess? Now, for those of you who have been following along in this series, you should be able to recall the Illuminati card game, and that they are very prophetical in nature, even though they were printed between the years 1982 and 1995. Now, the Illuminati cards predicted, among other things, the destruction of the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, and they've also predicted a lot of other things that have come true. Why would the Illuminati cards have any connection to the goddess formation? Let's face it, they do look alike, especially when we note that it is a goddess figure with the planet Venus shining overhead. Again, we have more similarities and possible connections, but it seems we have no answers. At least, not for now, it seems. This next crop formation is a very unique one, but not if you're in the occult world. At the very top of this formation is the moon symbol, which represents the goddess of the occult world. Directly below it is a pentagram, which is a symbol for the god in the occult world. Notice how the pentagram is within another symbol. That symbol within the circle and cross-connected at the bottom is known as the Ankh. It is the Egyptian sign for reincarnation, and it is among the oldest symbols for that belief system in existence. It is also a common practice to blend the god and the goddess symbols together along with other symbols, and in this case it would be the Ankh. Now, you can't help but wonder at this point if aliens are really responsible for the creation of these crop formations. Why are they creating these occult symbols? I mean, think about this. Why would these aliens suddenly be interested in these false religions that are worshiping false gods to where all these, dark and evil things are happening? Now, this particular crop formation is also very occultic in nature. When we look past the dizzying arrays of circles that make up this symbol, you can easily see that once you connect the dots, it forms what is known in the occult world as a hexagram. Now, this next crop formation is best known as the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, or the Tree of Life. It's made up of 10 circles, and the whole of the symbol is connected through horizontal, vertical, and diagonal lines. Now, in order to understand the symbol itself, in short, the premise behind the Kabbalistic Tree of Life is that if you have gained enough wisdom and enlightenment, you will be able to follow the correct path, and you will be able to achieve the ultimate goal of perfect enlightenment. Now, again, this is an occult symbol where you are led to believe you can find true wisdom and enlightenment through ancient and false gods, and not through Jesus Christ, who is God. This next symbol, most of you should recognize. It's known as the phoenix bird. Now the phoenix bird is the oldest symbol, at least in the Egyptian world, for the belief in reincarnation. Now notice that the Egyptian bird's feathers, they are on fire, which would indicate that the bird itself is going through the act of reincarnation again. Now for those of you who don't know the story, the phoenix bird would be alive for about 400 to 500 years. After that time, it would land upon the face of the earth and build a nest. And within this nest, it would catch on fire and the ashes would remain in the nest. And in the ashes would be an egg, and out of the egg would come the new phoenix bird, which would, again, create the cycle of reincarnation, or what some people in the occult world refer to as the wheel of life. On July 17, 2001, near Bradbury, England, this next crop circle had been made. This is the symbol of the Ouroboros, or what's known as the snake that's coming around in a circle and devouring its own tail. By doing this supposedly completes the circle of life, or what some people refer to as reincarnation. Now, at this point, I really can't help but wonder, why are these so-called aliens so very much interested in reincarnation? Could they be trying to tell us that there is no heaven or hell? Or could they just be trying to tell us that reincarnation is the truth and any belief in God is a lie? Now, let's be honest, folks. These are some very real and very tough questions that need to be asked if we're to put our faith and trust in aliens from outer space. That is, if they were the ones who created the crop formations to begin with. And this is what it seems that these aliens want us to do. Let's turn away from God. Let's stop looking towards the aliens and put our faith and trust in them. That alone makes me highly suspicious of what's going on, but let's just move on. Here we have another serpent crop formation. And the vast majority of different faiths and beliefs recognize that the serpent is a symbol of evil. Now, since it's well known that the vast majority of religions around the world consider the serpent to be evil, again, why would aliens be making these geoglyphs if they're supposed to be benign and benevolent beings themselves? Doesn't add up. Now, another interest that the so-called aliens seem to be having is in pyramids. Now, this particular pyramid formation has two outer rings, one very large inner circle, and 15 other circles that are connected by the two outer rings or circles. In short, there are a total of 18 circles and one pyramid. 18 is the number you get when you add 6 plus 6 plus 6 together. When you put this 6 plus 6 plus 6 pattern together, along with the pyramid, you end up with the same pattern that we found on the back of United States $1 bill. And for those of you who have been following along in this DVD series, you should remember that the 6 plus 6 plus 6 formation is one of the telltale signs of the order of the Illuminati. Now, for those of you who haven't seen any of this, please refer back to DVDs 1 and DVDs 4. This will give you all the information we've just been covering as far as the dollar bill. Now, this next pyramid formation shows the blazing sun behind the pyramid. The pyramid formation comes down to us from ancient Egypt, and the sun represents the sun god that was known as Ra. Now, if you look at this next formation, which is another pyramid formation, this one is really very, very interesting because, first of all, it looks like a capstone or on the top of a pyramid. In the center of this particular pyramid formation, you will notice there is an eye. Now, this capstone would be the missing capstone that the Masons, or the Order of the Freemasons, believe would give them full enlightenment. Again, look at the back of a $1 bill and you will see that the capstone is separated from the rest of the pyramid and that it has the eye of Lucifer in the center of it. Again, referring back to DVDs 1 and 4, we had proven that the two seals of the United States are, in fact, the two seals of the Order of the Illuminati. And again, I just can't help but asking at this point, what is the connection? Why would aliens be interested in such an obvious Illuminati symbol? Now, if you folks will remember, according to the Illuminati cards, the Twin Towers and the Pentagon would be destroyed. Here we have a crop formation made back on July 18th, 2008, which shows the Pentagon building in Washington, D.C. would be restored, and of course this next photo verifies that it has. Once again, for those of you who have been following along with this DVD series, you know that the shape of the Pentagon building is the most ancient of all symbols for the so-called God of the occult world. This symbol is known as the pentagram. It is also the symbol of Nimrod, which is found in the Holy Bible. Now, here we have one of the most unusual crop formations in existence. According to many, this formation looks like the head of a demon or a devil, and I would have to agree with them. It really looks like there's something demonic there. Now, when we take a look at the enlarged photo, there can be very little doubt that it looks like the head of some sort of demon or devil. Now, on the surface, this crop formation looks innocent enough. However, it is similar to another symbol we saw back in DVD 3. This is the official symbol for the Trilateral Commission, which is one of the 6 front organizations that was created under the auspices of the Illuminati to perpetuate their plans for a new world order. Now, notice that it is also made up of a swirling formation, and that the design of the swirls go into itself. It was also revealed that the official symbol for the Trilateral Commission held a dark secret, that the actual swirls made a 6 plus 6 plus 6 pattern. This was one of the many symbols that was created by the Order of the Illuminati. Now, once we take a look at this swirling crop circle formation, you can easily tell for yourself that it is nothing more than another 6 plus 6 plus 6 pattern. There is one last thing I'd like to reveal to you. Once you look at that, you'll see for yourself that there still is one more connection. Just one more connection that we need to consider at this point. At the very top of this photo is the famous Pusey down white horse. Directly beneath the horse is a crop formation. Now, this is the pyramid formation we had already looked at, in that this pyramid has 18 circles, or 6 plus 6 plus 6 circles there. Now, we know, according to Revelation 6:2 and Revelation 13:18 in the Holy Bible, that the Antichrist will arrive on a white horse and will have the numerical identification of 666. Now, is this crop formation nothing more than a a really morbid coincidence, or is something else going on here? Or is there a different connection we should be looking at? In the forefront of this next photo is a massive crop formation that is hundreds of feet long. Behind the crop formation is the famous stone structure known as Stonehenge. Now, is this another coincidence? Here we have a crop circle, and right over here is Stonehenge. I have a feeling there is no coincidence here. I think we see the beginnings of a connection. Now, here we have, in this next photo, yet again another crop formation. And once again, in the foreground, we see Stonehenge. Now, as I asked before, is there a connection between these crop formations and ancient megalithic stone circles? After all, we have to remember one thing. There have been more than 10,000 crop circles already made around the world, and 90 to 95% of them can be found in the Wiltshire region of England, where these megalithic stone circles such as Stonehenge can be found. And why do the Illuminati cards yet again seem to steer us in the right direction? Here we have an actual photo of Stonehenge and the Illuminati card for Stonehenge. Plus, we also have the Illuminati card for the priestly class known as the Druids, and it was the Druids who were worshipping at such places such as Stonehenge. Are we looking at another connection here? Now, not only am I convinced that there is a connection, but I think something very dark and mysterious is going on. And if I'm correct, it's not because of alien intervention, but it's due to something very evil and malevolent, something very perverse and twisted. Before we begin to show the connections between crop circles, stone circles, and aliens, we're going to have to take a brief look into the history of England. We'll go back into the past where people first began to settle on the island of England. Then we'll move up the timeline to around Stonehenge and when other megalithic stone circles were being built. Now, according to the history, and I must emphasize secular history, England was first being, shall we say, colonized somewhere around 8000 BC. Now, exactly how they've come up with that date, it's hard to say, because if they've used carbon-14 or carbon-15, to be quite honest, ladies and gentlemen, I don't trust either one of those dating methods, because they've been proven to be greatly flawed and inaccurate in the past. So when I give you these dates, let's say if we're discussing something about aliens that may have been discovered 27,000 years ago, just remember, ladies and gentlemen, that is secular dating, not necessarily biblical dating. Now, going by the secular date, England, somewhere around 8000 BC, people began to settle on this island of what we now call England. And these people were basically hunters and gatherers that came over from mainland Europe. Now, push the timeline forward about 4000 BC, and you're going to have young farmers that came from southern England and moved in and began reshaping the English countryside. They were cutting down vast area of trees and cultivating the land to accommodate the plants and the animals that they were domesticating. And we have to also remember that they were also modifying crops, livestock through various breeding techniques. In other words, they were really beginning to make themselves at home here now. Now, the young farmers' breeding techniques and deforestation of the land created a lot of interest. And as a result, visitors from Europe began to come into England. And it was at this point in time, slowly you start seeing multicultural England would slowly begin to emerge from this particular point. Now, push the timeline up, let's say to around 1400 BC, and there's many different tribal nations and people that's moved into the English countryside by now. We have the Belgi, the Celts I should say, the Gauls, Latins, the Romans, and so somewhere around 900 BC, it was at this time that a nomadic tribal people known as the Celts would move into England. Now, it was well known, historically speaking, that the Celtic people were a very barbaric, nomadic people, and eventually all other nations came to fear the Celts. The Celts were known to be fierce and determined fighters, and quite literally they seemed fearless in battle. And of course, we can't forget that according to these people, they had a very strange religion that allowed them the practice of human sacrifice. Little more would be known about England until the days of Julius Caesar. Now, during 55 BC, Julius Caesar started his first campaign of conquest in the British Isles. Of the Celtic people, he would write, "All the Britons paint themselves with woad, which gives their skin a bluish color and makes them look very dreadful in battle." He also wrote, "The whole nation of the Gauls is greatly devoted to ritual observances, employing the Druids as ministers for human sacrifices." Now, of the Druids, it has also been written that the Druids would usually hold aloof from war and do not pay war taxes with the rest. They are excused from military service and exempt from all liabilities. In other words, Druids would not serve in any military campaign. Now, the reason is because the Druids were the priestly class of the Celtic people. Quite literally, they held all sway and authority. They were exempt from military service, they didn't pay taxes, they would decide who could be tribal leaders and who couldn't. They were also the ones who would perform the rites of marriage and decided who could marry whom. And they would decide by various signs when the Celtic tribal people could go into battle. Now, as religious leaders, the Druids would bestow religious blessings on those various warriors who was entering into battle, and they could also refuse anyone from religious service for various reasons. And among other things, the Druids were noted for performing the rites of human sacrifice. In short, the Druids literally held all sway over the Celtic people and, for the most part, their way of life. Now, the Druids had a nature-centered religion, and because of this, they didn't have any permanent temples or structures that you would see a lot of religions back then and nowadays have. They usually worshipped in sacred groves or in caves, and eventually in stone circles, such as Stonehenge, Avebury-henge, and in these other megalithic stone circles. There were and still remains hundreds and hundreds of megalithic stone circles throughout the British Isles where the Druids and the Celts had worshipped. Though, as far as my memory tells me, there's only 80 of those ancient stone structures that are still in existence today. We do see some remnants of a couple of others, but for the most part, there's really only 80 good stone structures that are left anymore. Now, the Druids did practice, as I said, human sacrifice. I mean, that's beyond argument. And if we look at the writings of Diodorus Siculus in 36 BC, in his book Bibliotheca Historica, he had this to say about the Druids and their practice of human sacrifice. These men, speaking of the Druids, predict the future by observing the flight and calls of birds and by the sacrifice of holy animals. All orders of society are in their power, and in very important matters they prepare a human victim, plunging a dagger in his chest. By observing the way his limbs convulse as he falls and the gushing of his blood, they are able to read the future. Julius Caesar, in his book Commentarii de Bello Gallico, wrote on how the Druids would sacrifice a number of living human beings in a wooden effigy that was known as the Wicker Man. Now, according to Cassius Dio in his book Roman History, Boadicea, who was the first queen of England, who led the Celtic people against the advancing forces of the Roman Empire under the orders of Julius Caesar, would have Roman soldiers impaled as a sacrifice. And different Celtic gods would demand different ways of sacrificing. Esus would demand that people would be sacrificed by hanging. Tyrannus would demand immolation. Tertullus demanded victims would be drowned. The Lindau man, it's believed he had been strangulated. And then there's Kernanos, where human sacrifices were offered to him through the Wicca man. Now, once the Roman Empire had completely declined in the 5th century AD, the Celtic people remained unchecked. The Druids, once hunted down for their practices of human sacrifice, were now back in power, and they stayed in power until around 900 AD. As previously stated, the Druid priests, being nature worshippers, would hold their occult ceremonies in various places, such as groves, caves, and in these megalithic stone circles. Now, under their orders, hundreds of stone circles were built by their Celtic followers throughout the land. Archaeological evidence has found, literally, thousands of human skeletal remains, which proves that the Druids were practicing human sacrifice. Interesting enough, under Stonehenge alone, more than 4,000 human skeletal remains have been found, and Stonehenge is considered a small stone circle. The one at Avesbury is more than a mile in circumference, so you can only imagine how many human sacrifice victims must have been done there. Now, the gods of the Druids demanded human sacrifice, but they were to be performed in, various ways and such. Now, let me show you some of the stone circles in the Illuminati cards that has been alluding to them all along. Now, two things you should know about stone circles. First of all, it's estimated that there was almost 1,000 such stone circles in England. However, as I've already stated, there's only about 80 good stone circles left. The rest have decayed, or they were just knocked down, or just completely destroyed. And it's a shame, because we could have learned a lot of information about the ancient Celtic people and their ways. Now, also, most of these stone circles were built thousands of years ago. Stonehenge, for instance, there's a debate right now going on that Stonehenge itself could have actually, the original construction could have actually started as far back as 3000 BC, when the pyramids themselves were actually being built. So that one, again, as we're saying, that's going to be a lot of debating, and, well, we'll see what the archaeological evidence says at the end. Now, we do know that the Illuminati cards, if you've been following this series, you know what the Illuminati cards are. They spoke of these stone circles and the Druid priests who held ceremonies involving human sacrifice. Now, the Illuminati cards also appear to allude to some sort of belief that UFOs and crop circles are somehow connected with these stone circles. But we shall see as we go along if there is another connection here that we need to be making. The first stone circle I want to show you is Stonehenge. As you can see, to this very day, there are Druids, modern day Druids, still worshipping at this ancient megalithic site. And it was at stone circles like this one where Druids practiced human sacrifice. Now, this next stone circle is called Avesbury. This is the largest surviving stone circles in existence. It's more than a mile in circumference. This next one is called Roll White Stone Circle. It consists of 77 stones, and this one was built thousands of years ago. Now, in this next photo, you will see what we call Woodhenge. Originally, tall wooden poles made up this ancient circle, but now very few of those poles exist, so they put stone pole markers where the original wooden poles used to be. Here we have the newly discovered Durrington Wall. It's located just 2 miles away from Stonehenge, and as you can tell by looking at it, it is huge. Now, not much right now is known about it because archaeological excavations and examinations are still going on. But it does appear to be another stone circle. Next, we have what's known as the Merry Maids. This stone circle is located in Cornwall, and it consists of 19 stones. The next stone circle is the Castlereagh Circle. It's located in Cumbria, and there are about 50 50 stones in this area that make up the circle. Now, this next one is known as the Achahortes Recumbent Circle. Now, it's referred to as recumbent circle because, as you can see by the photo, one of the stones will be lying down horizontally, and it will be flanked by a large stone on either end. This particular stone circle can be found in Aberdeen in Scotland. Now, this next stone circle is called Callan's Circle. It's located on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. Here we have in this next photo the Swinside Circle. It's also located in Cumbria, and this one consists of 55 stones. And this last one is known as Longmed and her daughters. This one is located, once again, in Cumbria in England. And this particular photo was given to me by Mark Warbrick of England, who is part of the Prophetic Witness Movement International organization. Now, you can find them on the web at pwmi.org. Look them up, ladies and gentlemen. I believe they will be of a major interest to everyone. Literally speaking, hundreds and hundreds of occult symbols have been found in these crop circle formations. Now, is there a direct connection between crop circles, stone circles, and crop formations that have been found in the shape of occult symbols? Personally, I am convinced there is. And when I consider the following 4 Illuminati cards that appear to have told us that there is, there is a connection between UFOs and crop circles. Plus, as I was just saying, the Illuminati cards steer us towards Stonehenge and the Druids. Add on to that everything else we have discussed thus far, and I am convinced there is a major connection somewhere. And I'm going to show you that connection now. What we will do is, through various photos, take a close and comparative look at stone circles and crop circles. We shall see if there are any connections, any direct connections between both groups, and what those connections just well may be. By now, you should all be familiar with this stone circle known as Stonehenge. Right next to Stonehenge is a crop circle. And in this next photo, there is another crop circle right next to it. Now, here we have another stone circle, which all of you would know and recognize as Avesbury Henge. And just like Stonehenge, this stone circle also has crop circles being created right next to it. And in this next photo, you will see the occult symbol known as a hexagram, once again, right next to the stone circle known as Avesbury Henge. Now, are we beginning to see a pattern here? You know, that something is beginning to add up, ladies and gentlemen? Let's move on. Now, this next stone circle is known as the Rollright Stone Circle. And I'm sure you're not surprised to learn that there was a crop circle right next to it. You can see Rollright Stone Circle towards the upper left-hand corner of the photo. And once again, we have another crop circle right next to this stone circle known as Rollright Stone Circle. Here we have the recently discovered Durrington Wall Circle. And of course, here are the remains of a crop circle formation right by it. Now, this last formation that we should look at is known as Woodhenge. Once again, we have the remains of a crop formation or crop circle right by it. Crop circle formations are appearing by the thousands next to ancient stone circles in England. But why? Why are these crop circles appearing next to the stone circles? And just as important, why are there hundreds and thousands of crop circles in the formation known as occult symbols? Wiltshire, England is unique in the world. Not only does it contain numerous stone circles, but 90 to 95% of all crop circles are made in Wiltshire, England. I mean, think about that. That's 90 to 95% of all the crop circle formations. Now, why there? Why Wiltshire, England, of all places? Why can't 90% of all crop formations be located somewhere else? Let's say Nebraska or Texas. You know, what is in Wiltshire, England that these crop circles have to be made there, you know, and, you know, what's the connection? What is going on here, you know, with Wiltshire, England? All these questions, you know, bring up even more interesting ones, you know, like, are aliens actually responsible for crop circles? And if they are, why have they placed 90 to 95% of them in Wiltshire, England? Are aliens trying to tell us that they're responsible for the creation of these stone circles, as so many people believe? And since there are quite literally hundreds of crop circles that are designed after known occult symbols, are the aliens trying to tell us in some way that they themselves are practicing occultists, or that they approve of these occult practices? And are aliens trying to tell us that there is a direct connection between crop circles and stone circles, since it is believed that they were responsible for creating both of them? And if aliens created stone circles, are they trying to tell us that they approved of the practices of human sacrifice as was performed by the Druids? Now, as bizarre as this may sound, ladies and gentlemen, the questions are sound ones. If aliens are responsible for all of these things, there is a line of progressive logic that we can follow and you know, apply. Aliens first created the stone circles. Aliens created crop circles. Aliens created crop circles that match known occult symbols. Therefore, aliens must either be practicing occultists, or through their creations, they show that they approve of the occult and the practice of human sacrifice. And the mystery only deepens when we consider the geographical locations of stone circles. Some believe that a pattern emerges. And this pattern that emerges is what's known as ley lines. In theory, ley lines are natural energy lines that crisscross the earth in a matrix. It is also believed that somehow our ancient ancestors were able to sense and tap into the energy of these ley lines. And because of these ley lines, supposedly, they held great amounts of mystical and natural energy. So many structures were built on these ley lines, you know, such as Stonehenge, Avebury, churches, castles, ancient fortifications, and such were built on these ley lines. Now, it is believed that ley lines are lines of energy that crisscross the earth in a matrix type of formation. Every single line is supposed to be resonating with some sort of metaphysical energy or power. Now, because our ancient ancestors were somehow able to detect these lines and build structures on these lines to mark their locations. Structures such as stone circles, such as Stonehenge and Stonehenge, castles, churches, fortifications, and so on, were built on these ley lines. Now, ley lines in their existence, were first discovered in England by amateur archaeologist Alfred Watkins back in 1921. However, it has been suggested that Watkins' discovery was based on a previous work. William Henry Blake, in 1870, had postulated to the British Archaeological Association that monuments exist marking grade geometrical lines which covered the whole of Western Europe. If what Blake and Watkins was saying was correct, the whole of England is crisscrossed in a series of lines. These lines, as I stated before, are known as ley lines. Each line is supposed to have an energy field and resonates with some sort of metaphysical power or energy. Now, because the lines resonate with energy, they are supposed to be detectable by various means. One of the means would be dowsing rods, and as far as I've seen, dowsing rods seem to be the most popular means of detection. There are also electrical devices that claim to be able to detect the ley lines and follow them through some sort of electromagnetic field, or what's known as EMFs. Others claim that they can detect ley lines through the use of psychic powers. Still, others claim that their spirit guides reveal to them the locations of these ley lines. Now, before moving on, let me explain what dowsing is for those of you who've never heard it before. Water dowsing, or what is also known as water witchery or water witchcraft, is supposed to be the ability to detect or locate water through a dowsing rod. Now, traditional belief states that you go to a tree, and according to my occult background, they taught me in the Illuminati, people should use a willow branch. You cut a willow branch that is a fork-shaped branch. You would grab the handle of the dowsing rod, and if you look at this photo, after walking around, the tip of the dowsing rod would eventually bend down towards the earth, indicating that somewhere underneath the ground there was a water source. Now, in the old days, those who practiced this form of divination were called water witches. Nowadays, dowsing rods supposedly can also detect these energy lines known as ley lines. Now, in this next photo, you will see an old drawing of a ley line. Notice how the ley line runs in a very straight course, or in a straight line. And it's on this ley line that ancient buildings and structures were built. Supposedly, all the structures on a ley line were built there because somehow or some way someone could could detect the ley lines underneath the ground. Now, this is supposed to be the results of the phenomenon known as ley lines. Now, if you'll recall, it was through the advanced intelligence and technologies of aliens that stone circles such as Stonehenge and Amesbury were built. And to this very day, aliens are supposed to be making their presence known through crop circles. Plus, these same aliens were supposed to have been responsible for certain structures to have been built upon ley lines. Now, take a look at this next photo. This area in Brittany, France, is known as the Karnak Stones. More than 3,000 stones make up this formation. Not only do they run the length of more than 2 miles, but interestingly enough, the Karnak stones are supposed to have been built on ley lines. When I consider ley lines and their so-called connections to stone circles and crop circles, something very troubling comes to the surface. We know that many of the ancient stone circles is where human sacrifice had been performed, and we also know that hundreds of stone circles had been created in the form of many well-known occult symbols. Now, here's what's troubling me. Let's take a look at this next photo. This ley line is known as the British St. Michael Line. All the structures on this line were built in such a way that on May 1st at sunrise, the sun's rays would run up and straight down the line and pass every single building on it. Now, for those of you who have been following this series from the beginning, you know that the ancient Druids and the Illuminati have 8 nights in which human sacrifice is performed. May 1st is known as Beltane in the occult world, and it is the second highest night of human sacrifice on the Illuminati calendar. Why would aliens, if they're responsible for the structures that was built on these ley lines, have the British St. Michael Line built so that it would show everyone when Beltane had arrived? Beltane, if you remember, is a night of human sacrifice. So why would aliens be interested in such a thing? I mean, what's even more complexing is the crop circle and ley line connection. This next photo, if true, shows us that the ley lines in Scotland make up a known occult symbol that is called the inverted pentagram. Now, if you'll remember, we have seen a crop circle that is the same exact symbol as the inverted pentagram. The only difference is the ley line symbol is upside down and this crop circle symbol is right side up. Now, why would aliens have ancient people build structures in such a way that they would end up forming known occult symbols as the inverted pentagram? Why would aliens be interested in the occult to begin with? Now, this next photo is that of Sedona, Arizona. Now, Sedona, Arizona is supposed to have many vortices in which resides huge amounts of metaphysical energies and reservoirs that's just floating out in, the heavens. Now, it was back on August 16th through the 17th in 1987 that we had what was known as the very first harmonic convergence. Now, at that same time, a rare alignment of the sun, moon, and 6 of our planets had occurred. And according to astrological interpretations, this alignment indicated that a shift in the Earth's energy would bring us from a warlike people to a peaceful people. Interesting enough, it was on August 24th, 1987, that a grand alignment of 8 of our planets did occur. And if the reports are accurate, at some of the yearly harmonic convergence meetings, up to 1 million people around the world would hum and call down spirits to the earth. Now, taking a look at the ley lines around Sedona, we see 2 symbols in this photo drawn in red, which are supposed to be made from the connections of the ley lines themselves. The first one is the 6-pointed star known as a hexagram. For those of you who have been following this series, you know that a hexagram is the foulest and most evil of all symbols in the occult world. You need a hexagram if you're going to summon, and I mean literally summon, a demon to this plane of existence. The second symbol that connects to the hexagram towards the upper right is called a pentagram. Now, a pentagram is a 5-pointed star, and in the occult world, you use this symbol to communicate directly to demons. Now, let's compare the ley lines of Sedona to crop circles. In this first photo with the crop circle, it shows a familiar pentagram or the 5-pointed star. The second crop circle photo, which you should see, shows the hexagram or the 6-pointed star. Now, if ley lines are real, why would they be in the form of known occult symbols such as the pentagram and hexagram? Plus, there might be something to all of these so-called ley lines, because in this next photo, where the crop circles can be seen, is a ley line. Let's face it, on the surface, none of this seems to make sense. First, we have seen many different stone circles where Druids practiced the rites of human sacrifice because of their occult religion. Second, we know that crop circles are being created next to the stone circles where human sacrifice had been practiced. Third, we know that hundreds and hundreds of these same crop circles are in the form of what's known as occult symbols. Fourth, according to people in various occult religions, ley lines are lines in the earth that hold metaphysical occult energies that can be tapped into, and has also been used in the past to connect stone circles where occult practices had gone on. And now, as we have seen through various photos, ley lines in various parts of the world form known occult symbols just as crop circles do. Plus, we also know that crop circles, which appear to go hand in hand with stone circles, can also be found on ley lines. Is there a connection to all these events, or are all these things just one unfortunate or massive coincidence? There is, from my perspective, most assuredly a definite connection that I will show you, but not now, later. There is still a lot more ground for me to cover so that you will have all the information necessary to see the big picture. What we're going to do right now is end DVD 9 here, which is section 8, and we'll pick it up on DVD 10, section 1. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.